special. We've got a celebration of the music of Edward McGuire. And of course Eddie himself is here and will be participating in the performance, along with a whole host of other characters, all of whom are listed in the programme. So, without further ado, let's just introduce the first players to kickstart this concert.
Well, thanks very much to Lynn and Amy for joining me there in what is the piece of the evening that goes back furthest to the Celtic times and the knotwork patterns that you also find in Pictish carvings. I've called it simply Celtic knotwork, but that covers a lot of territory because the same knotwork can be found in the art of the Norse and on Arabic beaten plates, brass work, and in Central Africa as well. So it's quite, the ancient art of knotwork is quite an international craft. So that was, if you notice, the flutes were weaving in and out like the lines of a Celtic knot that go under and over, and represent the roots of life, basically. So that's quite a good place to start this evening. And the pieces are going to range not in chronological order, but over the decades. And I'll speak about some of the origins of the various pieces and what they're all about. So next, I would like to welcome on Kieran, who has actually devised the evening. Thanks, Kieran, for working on it so well and getting everyone together to put such an evening together. So Kieran is going to play on solo guitar a piece called Slip Jig Blues. And there's a bit of Celtic connection here as well, in the sense that I was on a train, I think going from Partick into central Glasgow or maybe to Edinburgh, but it passed Finniston in 2002. And onto the train from the Scottish Exhibition Centre, or the Scottish Exhibition Centre, came several crowds of Irish dancers. They were taking part in the World Irish Dancing Championships. And actually, I expected them to be very full of beans and energetic, but they all looked extremely sad because I could hear what they were saying, and they had lost their competition. They had not succeeded in winning. So it was very much a cutthroat world competition that all the Irish dancing teams were in there trying to win their cups and everything else. But this group were very sad. So that made me think of the blues. They had the blues, the Celtic blues perhaps. And then I thought, why not write a piece called Slip Jig Blues? The typical 9/8 dance rhythm that you'd see in an Irish dancing. So this is an Irish influenced piece, not a Scottish one. But of course in Scotland you have slip jigs as well. The first performance of it, Philip, do you remember if you played it first or not? It was Stefan Grass in Nuremberg. His trio actually played it first. And I think that's the history of this one. In fact, listen carefully to anything I say this evening and shout out if it's wrong. I don't mind hecklers putting me right. But, so welcome to Kieran to play Slip Jig Blues. now a change of mood and a change of instrument. We have the piano next, with Lynn Fraser coming back instead of flute. It's piano for Lynn. So thanks, Lynn, for doing that and taking part. The mood change that I mentioned is that this is an in memoriam piece in memory of the playwright and poet from Glasgow, actually originally from Fife, called Tom McGrath. He was renowned for having started and invented the concept of the Third Eye Centre in Glasgow, which goes back over 30 years. It's now called the Contemporary Arts Centre. Unfortunately, it's closing, hopefully not temporarily. Hopefully temporarily and not permanently. At the moment, it's closing this month, which is sad news. But the Third Eye Centre was a very innovative place. It put on the Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra, a lot of art exhibitions and performance art events and happenings, when happenings used to be a thing. So Tom McGrath, this was played by a friend of his at his funeral. The friend was John Harris, who played it for the first time. And Tom was renowned also for playing the piano in his own plays at the Tron Theatre, the Traverse Theatre, and in London. Actually, in London in the 60s, he was the editor of a newspaper, a rather radical newspaper called the International Times, associated with the kind of hippie and new wave movement of the time. But when he came to Glasgow, he developed his playwriting skills, and he wrote a piece called The Innocents about his time in New York, and I collaborated with him on a couple of stage pieces as well. And he always played his version of jazz, his own jazz improvisations in those pieces. So that's why you'll hear my version of jazz harmonies in this piece called Farewell. And it's a meditative piece. So thanks, Lynn, for playing it. thanks very much, Lynn. And the next piece is actually related to environmental degradation, you could say, because the duet of Richard Hand's in the Hand Dupré duo commissioned me to write a piece when there was an imminent trip for them to Bangladesh. And just at a year or so before that, there had been major flooding in the delta of the Brahmaputra River. And it was reckoned that the reason for this was the massive devastation to the rainforests and the higher slopes of the Himalayan mountain range that had been cut down. The trees had been cut down, allowing water to flow much more freely. They've been replanted since. And this piece marks that occasion. In fact, I employed a Scottish connection in the sense that it's called the Piobaireachd to the Brahmaputra. So it was a sense that they would take a tune, a Piobaireachd-like tune, and play it in Bangladesh, and the spirit of that Piobaireachd might be such that it would calm the forces of the river down. So that was the sense of that. And it followed actually an article by Philip Thorne, who's with us this evening, in this Guitar International magazine, in which he talks about it and says that this piece followed on as a companion piece to another one about the same subject called Amazonia, about the chopping down, even in those days of 1987 that was, of the Amazonian rainforest and the shortage of the wood that was special for the guitar, Brazilian rosewood. So the two pieces are companion pieces, Amazonia, solo guitar piece, and Piobaireachd to the Brahmaputra, which is this one that they premiered it in Bangladesh, actually. So now, for this occasion, Adam and Stuart are going to play it. So thanks for you this evening in this performance. I wonder if you noticed at the beginning and at the end of that piece, we had, first of all, the descending spirit, and then the ascending, the anger is dispelled at the end as the bad spirit flies off. that was a simple idea I had to frame the piece. And you saw the extensive use of harmonics in that piece for guitar that created an atmosphere, and the use of trills in the bass, creating discords and tension. In fact, that's probably the angriest you would hear the guitar. It's difficult to make the guitar sound angry, but I had a good go at doing that in that piece. So hopefully that will bring the flooding river to a calm exit. The next piece takes us a couple of years later, when in fact, I kept getting asked to write pieces for musicians who were going places, and they needed a piece to suit the place they were going to. So Rob McKillop, who apologized, he came, but he had to go away again. Rob McKillop, and he had a duo called the Lorca Duo, and they were invited to go to the Lorca Festival in Dublin. So they wanted a piece all about Lorca, the Spanish poet. Now, Lorca, unfortunately, was killed by the Phalangists, or the fascist elements, during the Spanish Civil War, and he died in the south, the Moorish south of Spain. And his body was found at the site of a spring, an ancient spring from the Moorish times, which Moorish poets had written extensively about the magic of this era, of that place, and the spring in the desert areas. In Arabic, it was called Ain ad Domar, and that is actually the title of Scottish Opera's production 2 or 3 years ago, when they actually produced a new score, a new opera, all about that subject of Lorca's death and the events leading up to it. So if it comes back to Scottish Opera, I would advocate that you go and watch that. It was the best, I would say it was the best opera I'd ever seen, which is quite a statement to make, I suppose, but it really was a gripping and dramatic thing to see on stage. But my own piece is a more gentle utterance. Again, flutes and guitars are not capable of extreme anger, as I was saying about that piece. So I take a lyrical approach to the subject. It's a lament, it's a meditation, and it's subtitled Homage on the Death of Lorca. And it was performed for the first time in 1992. So I'd like to welcome back Lynn and Kieran to play Fountain of Tears.
before we enjoy the final item in the first half of this programme, your fellow artists tonight have put together a tribute for you, which we are going to present to you now. Yes.
This is totally unexpected, so thanks for I see. It feels as if a cake is going to be brought forth.
How did you guess?
Oh, see. Oh, it is a cake. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Oh, yes.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for doing this. It's really tremendous, tremendously gratifying to. Is this going to explode?
I have no idea.
I hope not.
Fire alarms, are they going to go?
Oh,
Sprinkler
dear.
systems? No.
It looks like nothing's going to happen.
And is the print edible?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yes. If you can't see it, there's actually 3 pages of 3 scores printed on the icing. I don't know how you did it, but I'm assured that the ink is edible. Is that the case? Has it got added minerals and vitamins? Yes, that's right. It's got autumn moon, Piobaireachd to the Brahmaputra, I see here,
Not wanting to like
and Amazonia. Well, that's just tremendous. A round of applause for the cake makers. Well, thanks. And thanks, Elaine, for your pyrotechnic skills.
Oh, yes.
Have you been
Failed.
practicing pyrotechnics?
No, failed. I would love to get involved in pyrotechnics. I think they're fantastic, but I didn't fail.
I know you can do
very
pyrotechnics on the piano, but
well. Not tonight.
not tonight.
Not tonight. We'll leave that to other people.
Okay then.
So, but I'll leave
Well,
you now.
thanks.
so
I'll
that
keep
you
this match as a memento.
can- You sure?
Yes.
All
Thanks
right.
very much.
Well, if you'd
Thanks,
like-
everyone.
Like
And
to explain a little bit
yes.
about the final item.
Oh, the
that we have
final item.
before the interval.
well, luckily the final item was designed to cheer you all up a bit, or slightly anyway, because we've had sad Irish dancers. We've had 2 pieces in memoriam, and we've had the endangered forests of Bangladesh. So to cheer you up is a piece called simply Caprice, which is self-explanatory. So I'll bring back Amy and Joe. Joe Woodward on piano and Amy McCall on flute. So sorry for getting them. Thanks for that. And welcome to Kieran and Lynn for starting off the second half of this concert. And I've been told that we're celebrating St. Andrew's night as well, if I've got the date right. So the cake went down well, thanks very much. And it created a bit of a celebratory atmosphere. And let's celebrate St. Andrew. The first piece of this goes back to that period at the beginning of the 2000s. And a friend of a friend, she was a dancing teacher in her youth and her 20s and 30s. And she was called Mrs. de Ruyg, a Dutch name. And for her she told me a lot about her early life as a dance teacher in Glasgow. And I wrote these three pieces as a tribute to her, basically. The first one is reminiscent of a Bach Prelude, I think. And it, because a lot of his music was based on dance forms. The second is obviously a waltz and a hornpipe. So enjoy this exploration of another exploration of dance for flute and guitar. Thanks. thanks very much to Lynn and Kieran there. And I hope that set a lot of toes tapping, the three dance forms there. But to create a more meditative atmosphere, I would explain that in preparation for this commission that Stuart Kelly asked me to write, I happened to be listening to the Radio 3 quite a bit in those months, and I kept hearing Liszt and a couple of his Consolation pieces for piano, which struck me as being, intensely meditative and reflective. So I thought, this is the mood that I'm going to follow in this commission. So I actually took the liberty of calling it, as in Liszt, Consolation. Don't know what the original Hungarian was, but Consolation it is as a title for this piece. And I would like to thank Stuart for asking me to write it and call upon him to create the premiere of it. Thanks. like to thank Stuart very much for premiering my piece, and it's given me lots of ideas to continue writing for guitar, and I hope to do so. So thanks very much, Stuart, for doing that. And now we move to the flute, solo flute, and Lynn is going to play Prelude 3, and you might be wondering why it's called Prelude 3. And the fact is I've been set myself a challenge. When in 1975, a school friend asked me to write a piece for him as a Christmas, and I sent it to him, sorry, not as a Christmas card, but as a New Year card. So it's basically a 2-page piece in the form of a greetings card. And I called it Prelude, Prelude 1 for cello. And that led to me doing more preludes. Other people asked me to write a prelude, and sometimes I would work with a performer to find out about the instrument, and in the process learn a bit and write a prelude for that musician. So that proceeded until I'd reached a certain number of preludes for all different instruments, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just copy Bach and do 48 preludes. Unfortunately, there aren't 48 sensible instruments. But I certainly completed the first set of 24, which I breathed a sigh of relief to having completed that. I'll give you the full list if you ask me later. But the third of them was written in 1985, and it's a solo flute prelude. And written actually took me about 10 years to get round to writing this piece. I'd promised my school days flute teacher that I would write him a piece one day. He ended up playing in the New Music Group of Scotland, and they actually played in here in those days. And that was a great privilege for me to actually come back and give this piece to him as a gift in 1985. So I had studied with him at the junior department of the RSAMD in Glasgow. So this piece follows a kind of format that I follow in many pieces, and some of the pieces you've already heard this evening have a kind of organic growth, not a kind of sonata form, but they grow organically, a bit like a flower has a beginning, a flowering, and a decay at the end. This one, similarly, it starts off in a burble of flute, a flurry of flute sound, which gradually transforms into a row of notes, a melodic theme, which gets tossed about a bit. It gets excited and excitable. It flowers out into a little quotation of waltz, and then 9/8 jig rhythm, which you might not notice because it's covered up a bit. But then eventually it finds its feet, continues a bit, gets a bit overexcited, and then eventually dies out, a bit like a flower in its yearly cycle. So that's the kind of organic, what I mean by an organic growth. The theme does not come back, but at the end it fades out and dies, a bit like some of the other pieces you've heard. And the fact is that this piece is another 2-page piece, which follows the format of Debussy's Syrinx, Honegger's Dance of the Goat, and Varèse's piece, Density Point Something Something, which is the density of something. I'm not quite sure. Does anybody know? Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Silver, perhaps?
It's platinum flute.
Platinum flute. Thanks. For that. Yes, yeah. Can you remember the mathematical formula for that?
You're asking too much of me.
Yes, that's right. Oh, well, you can look that up when you get back home on Google. So it follows that tradition. So I'd like to welcome Lynn to play Prelude 3. Thanks. now a change of roles for you this
Yeah.
time. With Lynn on piano. And Douglas McNeil on clarinet, the first time another instrument has been introduced to the proceedings. So thanks, Douglas, for coming forward and playing Elegiac Waltz. And just a quick few words about this piece. It actually is connected to the conflicts in the world, and it was written in August 2001 when much of my focus was on the Middle East, the conflicts in the Middle East and what on earth was going on there, with war developing, conflict getting worse and worse. And then September the 11th happened, and things got worse and worse after that. And now with the war in Syria reigniting, incredibly sad that is happening again. We're back to square one, I think. And anyway, having a dance form like a waltz gives much needed optimism, despite the fact that it's an elegy piece. It's a piece that is an elegy, but it has a dance form, which is the human element of optimism creeping into the proceedings. So yes, I felt that even after viewing tragic events in the world, we must strive for optimism and a resolution of those conflicts. So this piece tries to bring together hints of scales across borders and a method of resolving things. So Elegiac Waltz, thanks. up till now it's been composed music you've been hearing, but the next piece is an arrangement. I do quite a lot of arranging of old and traditional music for the group I play with called the Whistlebinkies Folk Music Group, and been going quite a few decades actually, in different guises. But way back in 1977, Owen might know the character I'm about to mention, Professor David Dykes or Dyches, and he was devising a television, BBC Two television history documentary about the rebellious Scots and the Jacobite period and the Gaelic period, the revolt in the Highlands from the 15th to the 18th century. And he asked us to come and play a melody which was extant and was probably a much older melody, but words were added to this melody at the time of the massacre of Glencoe. And it was called in English, "Great is the Cause of My Sorrow," which is probably the first line of the translation of the Gaelic song. But the Murs Glíne an Coan is the Gaelic title, which simply means death in Glencoe. So it's probably a much older melody, but words were added as is the custom and practice during critical events like that, to add new words to old tunes. And in 1692, have I got that right? Yes. 1692, these words would have been added, and it was sung at the time. Nobody can quite find the original Gaelic words, but there's fragments of them around. But anyway, we play the tune, and we played it in the Whistlebinkies with the instruments. We have bagpipes, fiddle, concertina, clarsach, and other flute and other instruments. But this is an arrangement of it for guitar that I made, and Philip Thorne had it published as a center spread in one of the guitar magazines. I think it was Classical Guitar Magazine at the time in 1982, and it spread around and got played a few times as a result of that. You could do lots of different variations on this tune, but this is one way of doing it. So I'd like to call upon Adam Brown to play "Great is the Cause of My Sorrow." Thanks very much, Adam. And now we're entering the sunset of the concert, and it's taking a turn to the melodious and the traditional. So we've heard an ancient tune. Now we're going to hear a piece that I've actually written in folk style. So this takes me to my work with the whistle binkies and writing and arranging Scottish traditional styles. Castle Gordon is based on a melody that Burns, words that Burns wrote about his visit to the Highlands. He travelled all around the Highlands, including to Inverness, I think, and Aberdeenshire, and to Castle Gordon. So I wrote a new melody for that poem, and eventually it was sung by Jamie McDougall and his bardic trio, which consists of Sharon Griffiths on harp and Matthew McAllister on guitar. That was originally written in 2010 for Hannah Phillips to play on the Scottish small harp called the clarsach. And it's quite a task to write a tune for a Burns song, because most good tunes have already been written. So it's really difficult to find a new combination of those 7 notes that hasn't been actually done before. So tell me, after hearing it, if you've heard this tune before. I may have picked it up somewhere, but I was trying to write an original tune for an old poem. Amy and Kieran are going to follow that with, for the first time this evening, you will hear a Piccolo, the young sister of the flute. And I wrote this piece as a result of playing in a trio on a National Trust cruise ship a few years in the summertime. And we always used to go to St Kilda and other places, but especially the special place that I loved going to was to Iona, and then going across, getting the small ship out to the cave of Staffa, Fingal's cave, in fact. Now, I think I've upstaged Mendelssohn here, as I don't think he went into the cave, but we did. I don't think they had a slippery path at that time, but they have now. Very dangerous path into the cave. And I entertained the passengers there. But I was trying to remember the melodies of the flute I was playing, and I closed my eyes for about 20 minutes. When I opened them again, there was a whole load of different passengers in the cave on that slippery path, and they were from some big American cruise ship, and I simply could not get back out again. So the danger was I would miss the small boat taking me back to the National Trust ship. And luckily, a companion who was with me and at the back of the crowd realized that and ran down to the seashore and shouted to the ship to return to pick me up, or else I would still be there. So I've had that experience of playing in Fingal's cave, so this piece resulted from that, and I wrote it for Piccolo because that's a kind of sailor's hornpipe type instrument. And indeed, it's in the form of a hornpipe. So this is Castle Gordon and Fingal's Cave, played by Amy McCall and Kieran McCrossan. Thanks. been asked to play a little encore for you, and I'm going to be joined by Lynn on percussion. So, yes. Have you got your percussion instrument? Oh, is it, that's right. I did bring a tempo block. Unfortunately, it was cracked, so we had to improvise a percussion instrument. And I rumbled through the kitchen and found this nice little shiny teapot.
It's lovely.
Yes, that's right. And it's got a technique to it that it seems to. At least Lynn has the technique. The pot doesn't have any technique, but there is a technique that you employ to change the pitch of it and the muffled nature.
Do you want to show what that goes like?
Right. Okay.
'Cause I forgot how to
Well, you're getting a free lesson on how to play teapots. See, the lid acts like a mute. So thanks to the Centre, the Musician Society, for their use of the teapot.
I'm not sure I'm
So
going to
it's a debut of the teapot.
Okay, where do you want me to go? So just
Just stand with me. This is definitely a piece we have not rehearsed together, so you just keep that rhythm going. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, da, da, da. Keep that going. That's in 7 beats in the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this piece, if you keep that going while I'm talking, this piece was written in 2011 for the arrival in Edinburgh. It's a very Edinburgh-centric piece. It was to do with the 2 pandas who came to Edinburgh, Yang Guang and Tian Tian. And they're away now, but this piece was asked, the people that asked me to do this were children's classic concerts. And we wrote a song to go with it. This is the Panda dance. And I think if this had been diplomatic relations, there was a golden age of relations between Britain and China. It all broke down after Cameron's demise or departure. The diplomatic relations soured, and we didn't get a chance to play in Edinburgh Zoo to the pandas. That was the big thing. So I think if we had played this tune to the pandas, we would have lots of little pandas running around now. So it's very much a fertility song. So you've got to imagine the pandas dancing about, the small pandas that didn't come about. They eventually do so much dancing about that they fall asleep.
tonight. And I hope you all enjoyed playing it as much as we enjoyed listening to it. Thank you.
And thanks from me to all of you for putting in the hard work. I know that it is requiring of hours of practice and getting together.
Yes.
So thanks again. Thanks
Yes.
everyone
Yes.
for doing that. Thanks to Stuart for commissioning that piece as well.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it's always a great honour when
Yeah.
we're the first place to hear a new performance of a new piece.
Yes.
And so we've had two tonight, so that is absolutely...
It was thrilling for me too, because that's
Yes.
the first time I'd heard it. I hadn't actually heard it in rehearsal either.
Right.
So it was a very gratifying event.
So
So-
you were pleased with it. You're not going to.
I was excellently
You're not gonna go.
pleased. Yes.
You're not going to kill him on the way out, no.
No, quite the opposite. I was really
Yes.
taken by your performance. Thanks again.
And we've had, as I say, quite a combination of different instruments tonight. Primarily flutes and guitars. Now we all know why you probably write for the flute.
Yes.
You know, having seen what you yourself have contributed, performance-wise tonight. Why the guitar?
The guitar actually was my first instrument, surprisingly.
Oh, right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and quite an interesting beginning to. I'm not quite sure where to start. Certainly, my father's male voice choir sung in our family home, and had rehearsals every Saturday, which then they had a good drink and started singing solo songs. And I kept well out of the way of that. But I got an earful of harmonies and improvised bass lines and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And very much at the same time, there was the explosion of rock and roll. When I was 8 years old, I went to see Blackboard Jungle and Rock Around the Clock, and became a rock and roll fan at the age of 8. So I must emphasize the ages are important here. Between the age of 8 and 11, I was an Elvis Presley fan. And I used to do, what do you call it? Look-alike performances in back courts. And that gave me a taste for the guitar. It was seeing Elvis turning the guitar around and playing it like a percussion instrument, and seeing the members of his group playing what I now know as a kind of jazz style, and other instrumentalists like Fats Domino and Little Richard playing the piano, and other really wild early rock and roll musicians that gave me a taste of the excitement of rhythm. So I always remember looking fascinatedly at guitar shop windows and seeing all the strange shapes of guitars. I think in retrospect they were probably ukuleles, mandolins, and electric guitars,
Yes,
all
banjos-
sizes and
banjos
shapes.
Stuff, yes.
And my mother knew that I wanted one, so she bought one for £3. It was £3 from a pawn shop
Huh.
in Bardowey Street in Postle Park. And that is the guitar I still have, and I wouldn't change it because I've written all these pieces using that guitar.
Wow.
The fact is I don't play the guitar. And at that time, at the age of 9, I carved the names of the notes with a penknife into the frets so that I could instantly see what notes were. And I carved the name Elvis at the other end into the varnish. Not very nice lettering, but not as good as the Cape today. But that gave me an instrument which I stuck by. I never had any lessons on the guitar or learned any particular piece, but it remains my companion go-to instrument, so that when I looked at it, I could visualize a piece. So I do kind of recognize it as a magical instrument. So I don't know if that sounds strange, but that's the way it works. And I wrote I did write it on using that guitar, very slowly working it out. Yeah. I mean, very, very slowly working it out, like 1 bar a day or something. So it takes me a long time to write guitar music, but I eventually get there. So that's the history of it. And then when I ceased being an Elvis Presley fan at the age of 12 or 11 and a half, I think, because he got his hair cut and joined the American Army, and that was the end of the rock and roll dream. End of the rebellion. Rebel without a cause was over, I think. But it's when I went to secondary school that I immediately took up the flute, when the teacher asked who wants to play one of these instruments, and the flute looked the simplest. The clarinet was far too complicated with all those bits and pieces. The oboe with its difficult to play reed, or bassoon, or violins. My father played the violin, so I was not going to do that. So that's it was all a series of coincidences, and
Yeah, I think a lot of life is.
When you say that it was a coincidence, sorry, that you picked up guitar and then picked up flute, and it was pure coincidence. It's like, when did you notice the relationship between the sounds that you explore with such love and a kind of like beautifully like footed relationship between them?
I think that the creative process is an interesting one to look into. I think in parallel or before taking up a musical instrument, I learned the act of spending hours doing something. I won't go into what that was, but it included things like maybe whittling wood or making some telescopes, because a friend of my father gave me a big box of lenses, and we tried to make telescopes and things like that. So I learned how to spend hours doing something. I think that's the main thing, to concentrate on something. And that I transferred that general knowledge of how to have a hobby, how to develop it, into writing music. So I used to take pride in making little booklets of music, neatly copied out with title pages and all the rest of it. Libraries were very good at that time. They were full of music. I'm very disappointed these days that most libraries have ditched their music books and scores. I used to take them out. Even in deepest Postle Park, there was a library full of scores. So I was able to take that out. They inspired me to make little booklets of my own to match the publications I saw before me. So it became a hobby, composing music. And I would use the guitar to write early pieces. Even before I knew the notes, I would write A, B, C in alphabet, using the alphabet to write down tunes. So it developed as a hobby, which later became an obsession. So that's how it all got going. And I used the flute and the guitar. And then my mother bought a piano. And I started writing short pieces for piano. So it was really the composing hobby that took over.